let's talk about estimating fractions for just a moment, as this can be somewhat of a confusing concept. So estimation is really best understood using a number line. So I'm going to focus on using a number line or a grid box here, and use these illustrations to help you decide, where things are at. So, okay, so when you're estimating, you want to use the terms 0 when we're talking about fractions, 0 and 1.5. That's really what we're looking at, okay? How close do these fall to the other? Now, sometimes it will say estimate to the nearest half. Sometimes it will say estimate to the nearest whole. And that makes a very big difference. If we're going to estimate to the nearest half, then we have to know that condition. If we're going to estimate to the nearest whole, then we need to know that condition as well. So we're going to look at a couple various examples as we kind of hang out here for just a second. All right. So the first thing we need to do is we need to pick a fraction. All right. So we're going to take this fraction 3/7, okay, out of this line right here. And you'll notice that there is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm sorry. Let's start that again. We're going to start with 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, right? So we're going to look at this. And so each of these blocks is going to represent, we're going to be at 0 and 1 at the end, but each of these blocks is going to represent a fraction. So we've got 1/7, we've got 2/7. You get the idea? So 3 out of 7, right? That's what this means. This is 3 out of the 7. This is the 4th out of the 7, the 5th out of the 7, 6 out of 7, and then 7 out of 7, which gets us to a whole, right? And then, of course, over here, when there's nothing, it's at 0. And I apologize that my writing is not the most beautiful in the world here, but I think you get the idea as we're communicating this. So let's take 3/7. Excuse me. Let's take 3/7 and let's estimate this to the nearest whole. The nearest whole. So if I estimate to the nearest whole, I'm either going to go with 0 or I'm going to go with 1. 0. Oh, and I lost my pen. Hold on 1 second. 0 or 1. And then my question becomes, which of these is it closer to, the 0 or the 1? Well, obviously, this is closer to the 0. And so I would estimate it to 0 if I was estimating it to a whole. Now, how about this one? Let's pick a different one. How about 5/7? If I was estimating 5/7, what would it be closer to? Well, obviously, I see that it would be closer to the 1. So I would estimate it to the number 1. Now, let's take a moment now and let's look at this one down here, okay? Because this, and we're going to use this to graph to the nearest half. I'm sorry, to estimate to the nearest half, or to the nearest quarter. So we're going to do the nearest quarter. So it's either a quarter, a half, 3/4, a whole, or 0, right? So how do we make this work? Well, let's pick a number. How about 1/11? How would I estimate 1/11? Well, I'd estimate it to 0, right? I would say that it is closer to 0 than it is to the quarter, right? Because it's right next door as opposed to 1, 2. So in that case, that's how I'd estimate it. Let's look at another one. How about 7/11? Now, if I was estimating it to the nearest half, I would go 0, 1/2, or a whole, which in this case would be 4/4. If I'm estimating to the nearest half, it is what? It's a half. It's closer to a half than it is to this. Now, if I'm estimating to a quarter, I'm actually right in between. So I'd go 3/4, right? So again, it's all about estimation. So you're going to have instances where your schoolwork is going to ask you to take a couple of numbers and to estimate them. Well, how would we do that? Well, let's pause this for 1 second and we'll come back and share an example of how to do it. So let's take a look at this example. The question is telling us, the instructions are telling us, explain how to find the estimated sum of 5/8 and 2/9. So we need to find the estimated sum of these two numbers. So we have to figure out a way to estimate, right? What would 5/8 estimate to? What would 2/9 estimate to? So if we were to look at this, let's go ahead and just for 1 second now, jump back over here and look at this number line. Okay, you remember this number, this line here? So we're dealing with a 5/8. How would you estimate 5/8? I think the easiest way to estimate 5/8 would be say, oh, it's definitely closer to a half than it is to a whole, right? So let's go with that. Okay, so we would say that our estimation of 5/8 is a half. Now, let's also take a minute now, and the other number, of course, is what? 5/9. I'm sorry, not 5/9. Sorry, the other number is 2/9. All right, let's come back here. And if we were to, in our heads, draw out, we can almost kind of figure this out here, but we're going to just draw a line and we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, right? 9. So we got 1/9, we got 2/9, we got 3/9, we got 4/9, we got 5/9, and we've got 6/9, 7/9. You get the idea here, right? 8/9 and 9/9, which of course is a whole or one. Now, we are working with 2/9, but what we need to do first is find our benchmarks, okay? Find our benchmarks. Now, some of these can be pretty easily reduced. We can reduce this to 1/3, right? We can reduce this to 2/3, and we can reduce this. So we've got that there. But our halfway mark is probably going to be about here at the between the 4 and the 5, right? So what is this going to be closer to? Our quarter mark is less than 1/3, so it's around here, okay? So how would I solve this problem? Well, I would say 2/9 is a lot closer to a quarter than it is today. We're going to ignore that third for now. We're going to ignore that 2/3 for now. We're going to go with the 1/2. And then, of course, our 3/4 mark would be over here, right? Just like we did over here. We just kind of estimated. We see, okay, this is about a quarter of the way. This is about a half of the way. This is about a third of the way, 3/4 of the way, right? So my 2/9 is going to estimate to a quarter, right? So let's erase some of this because it's going to get confusing when we go back. So we've already determined that our 5/8, right, is closer to what now? A half, right? So we've got a half. And our 2/9 we determined is going to be closer to what? A quarter. Oh, apologies. It's going to be closer to a quarter, right? So now we can solve this. Of course, we have to have a common denominator. The common denominator would be 4. So we would change the 1/2 becomes, we multiply it by 2 on both top and bottom, and it becomes what? 2/4. So we can go 2/4 plus 1/4 equals 3/4. So we've estimated that. Now, or we can just know that 1/2 plus a quarter is going to be 3/4. So it's very important that we be able to have an idea of how can we get to one of these numbers as we estimate. I hope that was a help to you and brought some clarity in some regard.